Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is the 11th album by The Cure called Bloodflowers, which was released in 2000. This is day number 13 on my month-long focus on the subgenres of electronic music, as far as like in the rock category, indie rock, dream pop, shoegaze, even some EBM, new beat, industrial, etc. I definitely wanted to throw a lot of balance in this month as far as like new and old and different genres and things like that, and I wanted to throw in one sort of maybe misunderstood album or fairly popular album, but maybe just kind of balance in some of the lesser known stuff that I've been doing, and I thought Bloodflowers would be a good addition to put in this. So Bloodflowers was released in 2000. I'm pretty sure I got the CD the maybe the day or the week it came out. I think at the time in 2000, I was 24 years old when this album came out. I was kind of at that time I was probably at an all-time maybe low as far as being a fan of The Cure. Well, Mood Swings was a fairly good album. I bought the singles, I bought all the singles. I saw them in concert. But as the sort of 90s went on, I just got so much more into other styles of music, and continued my progress into more electronic music through the '90s. The Cure just kind of was always my favorite band, but for the most part, I didn't really listen to them that much in the probably around that time. Um, so this album was a little bit of a surprise. I think from what I heard, Robert Smith wasn't necessarily satisfied with the way the last greatest hits was promoted. The album called Galore, so he didn't want to put out a single from this album. Although maybe someday in Out of This World, those two tracks were sort of put out as promotional singles, but not really. Didn't get much airplay, and so the album feels in some ways a little bit lost as far as it being an album, but also really not spawning any single, and that was kind of different for the time for The Cure, and I think the reason why I felt like reviewing this, in some ways I think it's one of the most misunderstood albums, or when I see these like top lists of like top 10 Cure albums or ranking the Cure albums, which there's a lot of videos out there like that, and maybe I'll do one like that. I do like ranking things, as you guys can see from previous videos and things like that. I really enjoy doing lists. I think it's fun, and I know it's maybe to some people it's kind of a cheesy way to get like viewership or something like that. I don't know. I don't think about those things when I do videos, but I do think they're fun to sort of see different people's opinion and how they rate their albums. And I do feel like Bloodflowers is probably the most interesting one because it's probably the most conflicted um, album in people's in when people choose their favorites or where it ranks. A lot of times it's sort of in the two-thirds of the bottom, although there might be a few people here and there that think it's really strong. But for the most part, it's really probably the most misunderstood Cure album that they ever released. When you think of the album Wild's Mood Swings, it's almost like there's a lot of singles on there. There's a lot of short songs on there. Um, it is kind of a poppy album in some ways, and maybe I think with most people, there's always a feeling like he was trying to make a follow up hit to like Friday, I'm in Love, and sort of trying to take advantage of that newfound success that the Cure got from Wish, and maybe that album didn't really resonate with longtime Cure fans or really the fans that sort of grew up through their darker years or their early years, and maybe it was sort of more the I wouldn't say the fly by night Cure fan, but maybe the indifferent, more poppy Cure fan liked Wild Mood Swings, and this Bloodflower seemed like his sort of return to making albums that more fit into what the rest of the discography is. And obviously he was really proud of this album. Robert Smith put his face on the album. He in some ways when he did concerts, he tied with the trilogy DVD, like tying Disintegration with Pornography and Bloodflowers, and calling it like a trilogy sort of. So he sort of vaulted this album into a classic status by his opinion. And I think with ultimately with fans, it didn't really get there, and it's still an album when you listen to, and I'll get a chance to listen to it today for the first time in maybe a year or so. I don't play this album very often, but probably once a year or so I kind of revisit, because it's always, I think, of any Cure album that they have that I feel is hard for me to judge. It's this album. So ranking it today and reviewing it and playing a little samples for you, and you can see my score. It definitely puts me on the hot spot of trying to judge this album for myself. And so, I thought it'd be interesting and review this. And I'm gonna play a quick sample of each song just so you can get an idea of it and you can see my score without me talking about my score in general. And then I'll come back with you and talk a little bit about my overall thoughts of the video. So yeah, let's check out. There's 9 tracks. Let's check out the first one called "Out of This World."
At it all, as I know we will. You and me, wide-eyed. I wonder, will we really remember how it feels to be this alive? I know we have to go, I realize. Stay so long. is neither fair nor unfair. The idea's just a way for us to understand that the world is neither fair nor unfair. So one survives, the others die, and you always want the reason why. But the world is neither just nor unjust. It's just us trying to feel that there's some sense in it. No, the world is neither just nor unjust. No, going young, so much. No, I won't do it again. I don't want to pretend. If it can't be like before, I've got to let it end. I don't want what I was. I had a change of head, but maybe someday, yeah, maybe someday. To jump if I wait too long, but maybe someday, yeah, I'll see you smile as you call my name. Start to feel, and it feels the same. And I know that maybe some days come, maybe some days come again. So tell me someday. If you die, you said, so do I, you said, and it starts a day you make the sign. You tell me I'm forever yours and you're forever mine, forever mine. If you die, you said, so do I, you said, and it starts a day you cross that line. Swear I will always be yours, and you'll always be mine. You'll always be mine. Always be mine. Remember the last time I told you I love you? It was warm and safe in a perfect world. You yawned and I had to say it over. I said I love you, I said. Side in silence, they pass away the day. So comfortable, so habitual, and so nothing left to say. Nothing left to say. Never sets again. These flowers will never fade. Never fade.
Alright, so there we got a chance to check out my score and a sample of each track from Bloodflowers from 2000 by The Cure. When I think of the overall, or the individual tracks, it starts out with Out of This World, and that for me is kind of the it wraps up the album in one song in some ways. It's sort of an adult contemporary version of The Cure. Um, for the good and bad, I do feel like the songs are polished and strong songs. There's really only one song that I think is pretty good. The rest of them are good, very good. And as you can see, the last day of summer I thought was excellent with a rating of 8 out of 10. So I think it's a good album overall. But I do feel like it's kind of an older Cure. It's kind of an acquired taste a little bit, and it's a really hard album to describe or really to put into context of who would appreciate this album, because it's not really the Cure fan that's gone through the darker days, or it doesn't really have the catchiness of even songs like From High or Wild Mood Swings. It doesn't have your lullaby. It doesn't have your obvious song like Just Like Heaven or Love Song or In Between Days. It doesn't have the hit on there. It doesn't have the darker side. It's kind of missing a little bit of melancholy in there. It's it's kind of like a rock version of The Cure, and I hate to say it like that because it sounds negative, but it's just a different style of The Cure. It's a more polished, adult, rockier side of The Cure, and it's just kind of dependent on what style of The Cure that you like. And for me, this isn't necessarily my favorite side for sure. I definitely like the moodier stuff, the more darker stuff, the more adventurous Cure songs. Maybe the more whimsical or melancholy or maybe even depressing or sadder songs. Like they have. I wouldn't say depressing, but like Sinking is one of my favorite songs as far as like or To Wish for Impossible Things, or Trust, or From the Edge of the Deep Green Sea is one of my favorite songs. Like, kind of the moodier side. Like this doesn't really have that style either. So again, it feels like The Cure in the year 2000. Like the late 90s rock music scene, like in popular, was really rough. And you can point to, I won't even name any bands because I don't even want them tied to this album, but or even talking about The Cure to mention rock bands that I don't like. But late 90s, when you think of popular rock music in the pop charts in the late 90s, early 2000s, not very good. A lot of one hit wonders, a lot of bands that maybe had a couple songs, maybe an album tops, but they were gone as soon as they came. And unfortunately, this album sort of is released around that time, and it makes it sort of feel like it doesn't have the deepness to really to be a favorite of longtime Cure fans. When I see the second track, Watching Me Fall, just 11-minute track, just too long. Maybe it should have been near the end, but for the second song to go into an 11-minute song, although I know Pictures of You, the original album version, was like 8 or 9 minutes, like to put the second track as 11 minutes long is really takes a lot of guts. And it definitely gives me that sort of, it sounds like the track's cut or open from Wish, and I don't necessarily, those aren't my favorite tracks either, although Cut and Open have grown on me over the years. Watching Me Fall is my least favorite on this album, and it really hasn't grown much on me at all. I do think the album sort of gets a little bit of steam from track 3, where the birds always sing. I think it's a good open to the song. The drums and the guitars work great together. I think it's more catchy. I think the music and the lyrics flow well. Again, though, it's more adult sounding. The guitar solo on it's really good, and it's sort of a mix of like High, the single, and sort of an adult contemporary version of the band. Same thing with Maybe Someday. I think it's a good song. I gave it 6.5 star, but it's not a song that I would probably ever play regularly or point to as one of my favorites off the album. You know, but I do think the second half is better. Like those first 4 songs, a little bit of up and down, but for the most part, really not my style of Cure at all. The last 5 tracks, a lot better. And that starts with Last Day of Summer, which I think is probably Well, it's definitely my favorite track on here, but I think it's probably the most impactful, maybe the most emotional. Really like the guitar on here. Smooth, it's got the melancholy, a good guitar solo, keyboard's great, piano, a little somber, and I could see some thinking that this is a little bit depressing, but I do think it's one of the most memorable songs in the last 25 years by The Cure. I think it's one of the best. I do think track number six, There Is No If, is probably one of the most underrated songs of their last 25 years as well. It doesn't blow me out of the water. I give it 6 3/4 song, 6 3/4 stars. But this is kind of the wild mood swings sort of style, but it's shorter and catchy. But if you listen to it a few times, it's really a catchy song. Um, and then the last three tracks just kind of continue on the stronger side. The loudest sound, I like the sounds they added in here. It's more moody, powerful guitar. That one got a 7. The track 39 probably should have been the opener, in my opinion. I give it 6 3/4 stars. I think it's a little bit better than Out of This World. And then probably my second favorite track on there is the title track called Bloodflowers. Excellent closer, dramatic ups and downs. The verses are really good. Probably one of the best vocal performances on the album, and one of the best guitars. And so that is my second favorite song. But in some ways, I respect the album again in more of a mature way. But the sort of carefree and whimsical and melancholy and that sort of quirkiness of the Cure is long gone. This feels like more of an adult version of the Cure, and the album is a bit of a chore to get through. It's a long album, pushing over close to 60 minutes. It's a long album, and I think there's a notion out there that the longer albums from The Cure are the better ones. When you think of like Wish and Disintegration, there's certainly long albums, but when I think of Disintegration, It's enjoyable to get through maybe in 2 listens. Because it is an even longer listen when you factor in the track Untitled and Homesick. But it's a long album. It's an enjoyable chore to get through. Where this one is kind of like it's a tough. It's not as enjoyable chore to get through. I guess to be plain and simple. But I think when you have longer albums like this, it might be more cohesive and connected, but and they're more drawn out, and but maybe the songs are a little bit too boring. Maybe it's a little bit too introspective and not as catchy. So I feel like this album, although I don't necessarily love Lullaby, it does put a whimsical track in there that's sort of your Close to Me, or your Let's Go to Bed, or your Love Cats. It kind of brings in a catchy pop song from The Cure, and kind of injects it into the album. So Disintegration seems to have everything of what the Cure fan would like. And then you factor in Love Song, which is a great pop song, and then Fascination Street, which is a great rock version of them. This one doesn't really have that. It doesn't really have the pop song. It doesn't really have there's some catchiness in here, but it doesn't have the whimsical. It doesn't have the carefree, and maybe Wild Mood Swings went a little too wild with that mood swings, but here there's none of it. So that's kind of missing. And then you factor in you don't have really the darker side of the Cure, or even if Bloodflowers tries to be that, it's still a rockier song, and so I don't really picture it as, because it's a heavier song. I don't really picture it as more of a moody or a vintage Cure song, as far as like it being a deeper song. And so in some ways, it's still an album that is hard to fit into the discography. And really, nothing's changed. Although I've given the album a score, I do think it's a good album, but I couldn't quite put it into very good. It's right on the edge, though. 69 out of 100. In some ways, I do feel like it's a disrespected album in the later years of the Cure albums, and often overlooked for any album after Wish. And even though there's only a handful of albums after Wish, I think when people do their greatest hits or they rank their favorite albums, it seems like Bloodflowers is an often disrespected album. But when I go in there and factor it, maybe it's not so maybe it's not so disrespected. It's a little bit better than I think that people give it credit for. I'll say that, because when you actually listen to the songs and you don't try to critique it, they're good songs. It's just it doesn't fit in with, I think, some of the more beloved moods of The Cure. I think there's no other way to say it. It just doesn't have that. It doesn't have the playfulness. It doesn't have the darkness on it. It doesn't have the moodiness, the darkness. I said that twice, right? Darkness. But yeah, and it doesn't have the overly fun Cure albums for the people that like the lullabies and the Friday I'm in Love and Doing the Unstuck and Wendy Time. Like, it doesn't have those fun tracks. For the good or bad, it's not really necessarily my favorite style of The Cure. So me and Henri are giving the Cure album Bloodflowers a 69. Henri is giving the album a 69, right? Right, Henri? Good boy. If there's something that you'd like to request for my channel, something electronic music based or electronic music related, my email is down below. Just give me an email and tell me your request. All right, and thanks so much. I really appreciate the support, and we'll see you on day number 14.
Electric Cafe.